Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, for those of you who geek out on this channel, you may recall a couple of videos that we did many months ago about a gentleman in Vermont who had the audacity to build his own gun range on his own 30-plus acres of agricultural land. That got the town folks completely freaked out. Away we went into Vermont Environmental Court, and at one point the story was that this gentleman, Daniel Banyai, had decided to remove all of his shooting facilities from the property. We thought that was the end of the story, but as it turns out, that was only the beginning. And now the town is hell-bent on absolutely ruining this guy's life. So today we're going to actually hear from the victim himself, Mr. Banyai. He's going to join us and we're going to talk about the town who wants this resident gone for exercising his rights. Okay, some of you may recall the story of Daniel Banyai. He bought 30-plus acres out in Pawlet, Vermont, way back in about 2016, had the audacity to put his own gun range on his property, started training individuals on his property, and that's when the town folk got pretty worked up and were hell-bent on absolutely destroying him. Now, even though Mr. Banyai ended up cooperating with the Vermont Environmental Court's order. Did you know they have an environmental court in Vermont? Yeah, that wasn't good enough for the township, you see, because they have not let enough blood out of Mr. Banyai yet. The fight continues. This has cost this guy millions of dollars. We're going to ask all of you to help out. But let's hear from the gentleman himself first, so let's welcome Daniel Banyai to the channel. Okay, hey everyone, listen, welcome to Washington Gun Law, Daniel Banyai. Now, for those of you who've been geeking out on my channel, you remember that I did a couple of videos about this gentleman about a year ago. This is a situation that I talked about in the intro with this ranch and having the audacity to want to exercise his Second Amendment rights on his 30-plus acres in Vermont. Daniel, welcome to Washington Gun Law. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to it.
Yeah, so listen, I got the viewers a little bit up to speed, but let's go back in our time machine and let's talk about you purchasing Slate Ridge Farm, 30-plus acres in Pawlet, Vermont. When did you purchase that land?
Yes, I purchased the land in 2013.
Okay, and this is, I've had a chance to look at it on Google Earth. This is a beautiful tract of land, 30-plus acres, agricultural. And what was existing on the property when you purchased it?
Excellent question. So when I purchased the property, there was an active permit under the same pre-existing non-conforming, or for the audience, lack of better words, grandfathered in foundation for what the previous owner was going to just put a small home there.
Okay. Right.
So that was there when I purchased the land.
Okay. And then after you purchased the land, what improvements did you make to the property?
Well, first I started with putting a gate up, which caused a significant amount of controversy with the locals. Then I started to begin to develop a firing range, you know, a gun educational facility, for a lack of better words.
Okay, now I'm assuming the state of Vermont, like every other state, if you're going to build an outdoor range, there are very specifics about moving earth and having safe backdrops and direction of fire and all of that stuff. So I'm assuming you did all your homework before you started building this range?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, it's the polar opposite of what you just said. Vermont has no staff. Yeah, there's no regulation. So basically what I did is I took a handbook from the Environmental Protection Agency, and I took some declassified United States range building protocols to instill what I feel, and many others that came, friends and family, would say the safest place to discharge a firearm in aspects of, if, heavens forbid, your projectile was to miss the berm or miss your target, it would totally be encapsulated on my 30-plus acres.
Okay, so you went, just so my viewers are clear, you went above and beyond what Vermont law actually requires to implement this range on your property. You agree with that? Absolutely.
I mean, there was provisions even that we did when we put the netting on the berms. A lot of ranges don't put grass or other, mitigating lead components. You know, we put a very highly expensive, environmentally friendly netting on the berm so that, you know, 20, 50, 100 years from now, the lead mitigation would be easier from an environmental standpoint. Those exceeded federal standards in relationship to what the Environmental Protection Agency would implement, or let's just say you went to a more commercial aspect, something that the government or the military would do. We fell directly in line with those standards to ensure that, as I've always been outspoken. I'm an environmentalist. I care about the environment. You know, when you look at my property, it's not a clear cut. It's a very eloquent design to maintain the environment.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to you, right? You and I talked about that before we turned the recorder on here, that you are a conservationist and the environment matters greatly to you.
Absolutely. You know, hundreds of thousands of dollars went into the construction. It went into the proper drainage, the proper future evaluation with clean out so that environmentalists could check any type of underground water, any runoff water. Any erosion was immediately mitigated, because I knew we would have some opposition from the anti-gun world. So I wanted to factor in a certain element that could be challenged from maybe other outdoor gun ranges or sportsmen's clubs.
Now, you, in addition to actually building a range, you actually built an educational facility on the property as well, because you were going to allow other people to come and learn self-defense techniques and actually train on your property. Is that correct?
Yes, we permitted it, and you know, that's an elongated process.
Right, and so everything you put on that property was permitted, correct? That's
correct. The 20 by 30 building was permitted. I think I sent you a copy of that permit. We built that to the exact specifications in our audit last year on my first arrest warrant. You know, they measured that off, and it is precisely 20 by 30.
Okay, so that's the kind of the setup, and I just want to make sure that we're clear. Is Daniel Banyai buys 30 plus acres in Vermont, wants to put a gun range on his property. There's not a lot of legislative guidance as to how to do this, so he goes above and beyond the call of duty, because he's so environmentally conscientious and actually does a bunch of work, invests hundreds of thousands of dollars into the property, builds a couple of other structures for educational purposes, all of which are permitted and all of which are built exactly to the specifications that you had the permit for, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And none of the adjoining neighbors, that is the property owners living directly adjacent to you that share a property line with you, after this range is open, my understanding is not a single one of your neighbors has an issue with this?
Well, let's define that. So none of my abutting neighbors. So none of the neighbors directly, on my property boundary. No, they did not. They had the ample amount of time with the personal letter that by statute I have to mail to them. They have an ample amount of time to speak up during a 15-day grace period, and an ample amount of time to voice their, questions, comments, concerns to the zoning administrator at that time. It wasn't my abutting landowner. It wasn't the abutting landowners. It was an evil group of people called the Warren Switch Clan.
Yeah, well, so tell my viewers about this group of people. They live out there in the Pawlet area. But I want everyone to understand that anybody who was a direct neighbor of Daniel had zero issue with what Daniel was doing on his property. However, collectively, other community members in the general vicinity got a little worked up. What did they do to you?
So basically, when we opened up in essence of saying, hey, listen, anyone can come to Slate Ridge to shoot guns for free. There was never an admission charge, a range treat. It was just free. You just came here. Some of what my ideological beliefs were is that anyone that's not a prohibited person, white, Jewish, Buddhist, straight, gay, person of color, I let them all come to the facility, okay, as any respected American citizen should, okay, and I stand behind that for any viewer that may not align with that. The town was up. They were just in uproars. The town of Pawlet is a bunch of racist, evil people, and this Warren Switch Clan is a derivative of the Ku Klux Klan. They're very evil, pure white people that just began to suppress my property rights. And by doing that, they found a clause in the statute that says that if they get a certain amount of votes, Okay. I don't remember the exact amount, but they got the votes and then they presented it to the town in this environmental court to have an equivalent vote as an equivalent, speaking, right? They can be spoken and outspoken up to equivalent of one abutting property owner.
So even though none of these individuals own a piece of property adjacent to yours, they're able to go out and collectively accumulate one vote as if they are an adjacent property owner?
That is correct. And they have successfully navigated through that process and have been very victorious in, destroying my constitutional rights and civil liberties on my land, for sure.
Well, and then here's a real interesting segue, because then we get into this whole thing where Vermont's got this environmental court, which, I mean, I just shuddered to think about an environmental court. I mean, how much abuse could happen there? And of course, you're Exhibit A here, because you get drug into environmental court in Vermont by this group of individuals, correct?
Sure. And it's a collective opposition, right? It begins with this group. It metastasizes into the town select board. It metastasizes into a radical, evil, town attorney, and then the collusion and favoritism with this Judge Durkin. Yeah, I mean, it's really a larger problem than what the general public because they're not privy to the intimate details of this. Maybe if this was transpiring, let's say in Connecticut or Massachusetts or New York, somehow, there would be a value of, wait a minute, this is not making sense. How can X, Y, and Z be happening? But in Vermont, it's the common denominator. They don't like you. They don't want you. They will eradicate you from their communities. I'm just a poster child right now because, there is a lot of anti-gun rhetoric. Yeah. There's a lot of racism right now. There is a lot of favoritism right now, and I'm not what they favor.
Let me ask you this. Were they upset that you had the audacity to exercise your Second Amendment rights on your property, or did they get more upset that you were willing to provide that education to any American, regardless of race, color, sexual orientation? You're an equal opportunity educator. And candidly, I think you and I could agree that some of the marginalized communities are the ones that should be armed the most, because they have a tendency to be most victimized here. Was that the big bone that they picked with you, is once you started teaching people that, didn't look and think like them?
Absolutely. When, some of the largest supporters and benefactors of this crusade are of the protected communities, right? The Jewish community, the LGBTQ plus communities, when they had come to my land, they were embraced. I would allow them to play, we have one federal applicable flag, which when the ranges go hot, the red 3x5 federal statute flag would go up, the range is hot. We would let them a certain feet below that, put their flag up or whatever. This infuriated the community because not only was I violating, their ideological views. They hate guns, period, right? Vermont is not this state that people think it is. It's a gun-toting, gun-happy, gun-welcoming. No, they say that so you make it an option, but don't choose it. My community is the ones that are defunding the police, saying military should have, social workers running around to stop the evil crusade. Like these people. Then you tack on that I'm allowing protected groups, protective people.
Marginalized communities. You're teaching marginalized communities how to defend themselves is what you're doing.
Right. I may not necessarily align with their beliefs, but I'm in no position to control or deny them accessibility to what is their God-given rights. They're a guest on my property for free.
Amen. So listen, you get yanked into environmental court. I ended up doing a video. I'm like, man, take a look at what's happening to this poor guy out in Vermont. The next story I get is that you had reached what I thought was some kind of a settlement where you were going to take down most of those structures. And then the story on a national level went a little cold after that. However, I find out later on through a mutual connection of ours that was just the beginning of this nightmare for you, and that they have absolutely continued to screw with you to the point now where they're committing animal cruelty to some of your farm animals. So let's go through that, because I want the viewers to understand that after Daniel said, okay, fine, fine, I don't want to pick this fight anymore. I'll take all of this stuff down. And we thought the story was over. What happened after that?
Great. Yeah, so we ended up removing the school. We demolished that. We burned a lot of it and had to get rid of the materials because that was a very controlled directive from Durkin, right? None of the building material can be within the boundaries of the land. Okay. So we took that down.
Now, this was a permitted building, though, one that they had given you a permit, and now they're making you tear it down.
Right. So we removed that. We took that down. We completely demolished and destroyed the shooting facade. We removed the chicken coop. We removed the sheep shack. We removed the barn. And we also, tore down the berms. But the issue with the berms right now, which is why the latest arrest warrant is out for me, is that the judge said that the berms need to go back to the natural way God made it. Now, that's a problem because the previous owner or the original property owner from documentation standpoint, we're talking about 100 plus years ago, is now deceased. Right. And then there's me. So there's only two people on the planet that knows what the property looked like because it's never developed. It was never developed.
No, and I can tell by looking at the satellite images, this property's never been developed.
So I put it back to the way that was fair. There's no berms. There's no way to shoot at it. But now the town has advised this, corrupt racist judge, Thomas Durkin, that I did not take the berms down. As far as the agriculture is that we had to take a silo down, which I'm not sure you're familiar with.
Well, now you had a silo on the property, correct? When you purchased it, there was a silo on a pre-existing silo on the property, which again, this is agricultural property, everyone. So a silo on the property is pretty normal, okay? And then what became of that silo? Because when you told me that story, I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, so we took that down. Actually, I'm filming a documentary to expose this. One of the things is that from the accountability standpoint, but I'm not here to go into that. I don't want to waste time. We took that silo down. Like we had to remove that from the property. And then I have to feed the animals. I can't, right? Okay. So I bought a new silo and we got about 12 or 13 volunteers to put it together, to put it back up. Under the agriculture statute, permitted agricultural.
So again, everything by the books here, putting up a new silo. Yep.
By the book. In the Vermont statute, actually, the silo is the only verbiage that significantly defines that object, right? Farm structures, there's ambiguity there. Farm equipment, there's ambiguity. The silo is a silo. So we put the silo back up, and now the attorney is arguing it's the same silo as before. She had quoted, I believe, repainted and relabeled or something of that nature. But, we have in front of the judge right now a receipt of a brand new silo and dozens of statements from Vermonters that came to help put it together. But they want it removed immediately.
Why? You have an agricultural operation. You have livestock, farm animals on your property. Yeah. The silo is necessary to store the grain that you need to feed your animals. Why on God's green earth do they want this thing removed?
It's control and conquer. This, I've oftentimes called her an ambulance chaser. I mean, she's going to the top right now, movie deals, book deals, it's really fascinating. But her hate towards me, her hate towards people like me, really, really motivates this zeal, right? Like, let's get in there and crush this man. Let's, fuck all the animals, forget about his stewardship to the community, donating meat, eggs, fruits and vegetables. Let's just get him out of here. And that shows how deep they're willing to go to violate something that the state of Vermont has stood for hundreds of years. The agricultural law and the right to farm.
But you see, now they're putting in a position where if you were to take all of these things down, necessary for the maintenance of your livestock, could you be cited with animal cruelty all of a sudden? Because now you can't care for these animals.
Absolutely. In the statute, without the proper horse stables, for the horse, it's a felony. Yes.
Right. And then, of course, we're in the wintertime now, too, which means you don't want all your farm animals just hanging out outside all the time either. So they have to have structures to go inside.
It's very, very concerning because, what do we do? How do we fight this particular situation? And one of the particulars right now, what is so tumultuous is that the minimus, the arrest warrant, is being appealed in the Vermont State Supreme Court. Like, we haven't been heard yet, but the judge has methodically rolled that back into this new motion and has included remove the new silo, remove the new, cattle running, remove the new goat milking parlor.
How many arrest warrants, and this blows my mind that we have this Vermont environmental court, how many separate arrest warrants have been issued for you since this suit began?
There's been two.
Have you ever been taken into custody on either one of them yet?
No, negative. My attorney's got some, pretty ridiculous allegations and threats from the state police commander on Friday of their future techniques of what they're going to do on raiding the property and, taking people into custody and getting to the bottom of this evil civil offense of building a building with a valid building permit. I mean,
Daniel, I just got a couple of other questions for you here. And the first one is this. Do you think they're out for you there because you had the audacity to exercise your Second Amendment rights, or do you think that they're out after you because you had the audacity to exercise your First Amendment rights and to educate a huge segment of individuals that those on the gun-grabbing left want to stay subservient to them, and they tell them all the time, you don't need arms, you don't need guns, you don't need anything, we can take care of you ourselves. Of course, we know now they can't. And you're out there trying to empower these groups, okay, these marginalized groups, saying, hey, listen, ultimately, you and you alone are responsible for the safety of your community. What do you think's really got them worked up the most here?
I think it's a combination of 50-50. In actuality, that's being argued in our federal case in the Second Circuit right now. I think the community got concerned about their professionalism, right? The standard operating procedures, the etiquette, the fundamental components of survivability and surviving. Yeah. Not to be miscued with being like this conspiracy theorist prepper.
No, you're just teaching people basic self-defense, how to survive in the world we live in nowadays.
Right. It's nowhere near being illegal. Like when Governor Phil Scott did his press conference and labeled me as the most dangerous man in the state of Vermont, that's just lunacy. Like we've got a terrible high rate of murder right now, fentanyl, human trafficking, but I build a valid building with a valid building permit, and I am now the worst criminal in the state of Vermont.
Well, yeah, and let us also remember that not a single adjoining neighbor of yours had any problem with what you were doing. And I think that speaks volumes right there. Okay, all the people who are directly adjacent to Daniel's property are like, they don't have an issue. It's all these yahoos in the community that have the issue. Now, I don't even want to, I probably shouldn't even have you do the math because you might vomit on camera here, but I'm doing the math in my head as to how many hundreds of thousands of dollars you have dumped into the property and then redoing the property and then the legal expenses and then all the other expenses that come along. What are you, how is it even possible that you could fund this litigation at this point?
Yeah, excellent question. So, there's a number of groups out there that are within the protected communities that have been very, very flamboyant in supporting me, labeled as benefactors. There are other, federal organizations. I can tell you the most profound is people that call me, email me, or come to the property to give thanks for my strength. That's way, way better than any dollar. To give me motivation to stay strong and keep fighting this. But this has cost, millions of dollars. Let's just face it.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Yeah, it has been really, really damaging. And it begins to question a lot of American souls and conscientiously, like, when and where is it important to fight for? And when and where should we stop fighting,
Right. Well, and that's a good segue to the fight that you're still undergoing, because this fight, unfortunately, is a long way from over. And I'm getting the impression that the town of Pawlet probably picked the fight with the wrong dude here, because
they've actually said that.
Yeah, you got a little fight in you, and don't ever change that. Don't ever change that. But hey, listen, before we started recording this, I said, hey man, you got to give, send, and go set up, and it turns out you do. So tell my viewers, and listen, everyone, I want you to listen carefully, because listen, if you let a guy like Daniel Banyai die on the vine on this thing, you know what? You're all next. You're all next. They're coming after you also, okay? Because it's the way you think and the way you choose to live your life that's made you an enemy of these people. So listen up very carefully. Daniel, how can people help out the cause here?
Well, they can send to the Give, Send, Go. I sent you the link.
Yep, right there, everyone, right there.
Yep, they can, always get in touch with me personally. We advocate for a group theory in navigating through this. I mean, whether you're a lawyer, you're in legal academia, you're scholastic in some type of writing or disseminating this story, we're asking people to you may not like me, you may not like guns, you may not like what I stand for, but what I'm standing for is all of our constitutional rights in a plethora of constitutional amendment violations that are not limited to the first and the second. But what I ask people to do is to get behind me, because we can agree to disagree on maybe what you don't like about me. But if I stand all by myself, I will continue to fight for your rights. I'm willing, ready, and able to fight for all of our rights. But it would be better if we had more participation.
Amen to that. And listen, to all my viewers, when you take a look at what Daniel's case is all about, yeah, we all want to jump to the Second Amendment issue. There's First Amendment issues, a very strong First Amendment issues. There's very strong Fourth Amendment issues here, because we got government action taking place on private property. Daniel is out millions of dollars right now with no recourse. That's a Fifth Amendment unconstitutional taking here, okay? So this is tyranny in its purest form at this point. So I'm going to ask all of my viewers, check out the Give, Send, Go link down below. I'll link up the other videos that I've done. I'll also link up some other stories about Daniel's plight, because I'm not the only one covering this. But listen, I'm just asking everyone, if you can give a little or you can give a lot, help this guy out. Daniel, what else do you want to tell my viewers here real quick? What's next for you? What's the next battle coming up for you? Well,
obviously, it's to avoid arrest and incarceration.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, that's a tumultuous situation in its own. And then, look for other legal precedent. Look for more, strong legal advisement, strong, legal counsel to help get involved and ultimately show the accountability, right? Show that removing friends and family from your land because a judge says he doesn't want that, removing the food source for the animal, removing these educational components is an atrocity. It literally is. It's so fundamentally inappropriate, but they're getting away with it. And if we don't do something now, our children's children will not have the rights that we're currently fighting for or embracing.
Amen. Amen. Folks, his name is Daniel Banyai. He is out in Pawlet, Vermont. He is an American who has the audacity to want to exercise his own freedoms. He wants to live the life that he and his family have decided, and he wants to help train others in the art of self-preservation. And for that, this community is absolutely coming down on him. Please consider the Give, Send, Go account. Daniel, promise me you'll come back on and you'll keep us posted, and hopefully someday we'll do a video where you have a big victory celebration. Wouldn't that be awesome?
That would be God's gift.
All right. Hey, happy holidays to you and your family. God bless you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
So listen, the moral of the story is if you move into the wrong part of this country and you have the audacity to engage in your own independent thinking, your own independent thought process, and to live the life that you and your family wants, well, you may just buy yourself 10 years of litigation. The town of Pawlet has absolutely one goal in mind, and that is to absolutely financially ruin this gentleman and run him out of town. I'm asking all of you to consider helping this guy out. The Give, Send, Go link is down below in the description box, and obviously there will be more developments, and we will be sure to let you know. Now, in the meantime, if you got any questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. If you don't, that's okay. That information is also down there in the description box. Now, let's everyone remember the part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching, and stay safe.